So can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir, we can hear you. Good evening, sir.
So good evening, good evening. Thank you, Spova, and thank you everyone for joining this webinar. I think it's great to have such a large number of people taking interest and joining this discussion today. So I have my colleague Shubhobroto Ghosh, who is our wildlife research and project manager, who will talk in more detail about our work around wildlife. But before that, I would like to take this opportunity to share a little bit more about World Animal Protection, what we do, who we are, and how you can actually help animals. Uh, Being a veterinarian, plus as an individual in your in capacity by accessing different platforms and different networks. So, some of you might be aware that World Animal Protection is an international animal welfare charity working in more than 52 countries around the world. Uh, Currently, we are focusing on two main two main animal welfare related issues. One is wildlife used for commercial purpose, and the other is exploitation of farm animals for economic benefits. So we have these two strategic priority areas we are currently focusing. But being an animal protection and animal welfare organization, we very actively engage, participate, and speak up against any animal cruelty taking place around us. But as I said, our strategic focus on farming and wildlife, and Subhabrata will talk more in detail about what we are doing specifically in India. So I'll keep my focus on the work we are doing around farming. So in animal farming, we work to improve the welfare of farm animals. So it's basically animals farmed for foods, from dairy to chicken to poultry to pigs and goats. In India, particularly, as we all know, dairy and the poultry farming is a true area which seems where the largest number of animals being used for or farmed for food purposes. As far as our current campaign is focused, we have been doing a lot of work around dairy since 2013 onwards. And as part of that work, we had worked with National Dairy Research Institute, Karnal, to develop India's first of its national code for dairy animals. So this code is basically uh, the guideline how animals should be treated in dairy farming, which talks about the different aspects of animal welfare, from food, water, shelter to veterinary care, and how their environment should be provided them to express their natural behavior. Currently, our focus is more on the chicken farming, where the welfare of chickens should be addressed. This campaign is focused on basically three elements. One is working with the government and different agencies, national and state government, to ensure that the policies and the guidelines exist in country needs to be reviewed, and animal welfare principle must be incorporated into that one. In addition to that, as you all may be aware, the growing problem of antimicrobial resistance, which we call AMR, and as we know that nearly the 70% of antibiotics used for the purpose of in animal farming for multi-purpose, including the growth of animals. So we would like to see that the authorities, the government must ensure that animal welfare should be used as a solution to tackle the problem of AMR in the country. And by integrating animal and their welfare in national and state action plan for AMR can significantly improve the situation. In addition to that, we are working with corporates who make money by by in the business of animal farming or in the production or the QSR who sell the end product. So we are working with these companies and engaging them to ensure that they must adopt animal welfare as a policy in their supply chain and ask their suppliers and contractors to improve the conditions in which they farm animals. So that's something which we have been doing with corporates, and we are encouraging them to make a commitment as well as start the implementation of implementing these policies in their respective supply chain. The third component of the campaign is focused on the consumer. As we all know, consumer has a lot of power, but often we don't exercise our power. So to exercise our power, people must need to understand what the problem is and what the solution is and how I'm related to that one. So what we have been doing that we are creating awareness among general public from a consumer's perspective that what should be a ethical choice in terms of the food they consume. So there are multiple approaches we are using. So people who are probably already vegetarian and only consume dairy, they can certainly look at the possibility of going plant-based. So the more we reduce the demand, the welfare of animals will be certainly improved because then there will be less number of animals used for food. The people who are have the food habits of eating non-vegetarian foods, our request to them is to make choices which is healthy for them and healthy for animals also. So they have the options to like reduce the consumption of animal protein and start moving towards plant-based protein. So the more, as I said, the people move towards plant-based protein, the impact and the welfare of animals will be certainly improved. In addition to that, what I think is important the, from from the food's perspective is that whatever people are eating and whatever we are producing to meet the requirement of, so for example, country like India, we need to also need to ensure the sustainability of the food system. And to do that, there should be a balance in terms of how much animals are used for food, what amount of natural resources from going into the animal farming. That includes from water to the amount of agriculture land, etc. So, so the more balanced approach we use, I think it's better for the environment, for the climate, and for animal, and of course for the people and public health issues. In addition to that, I'll very briefly go back into the dairy work which we have been doing. We did in the past, and we used a very similar approach there, and we successfully managed to get around 100 meeting for implementing animal welfare in their supply chain. And this National Dairy Code, which I mentioned, we developed with NDRI, was issued by the central government to all the state government to ensure the implementation of these recommendations in their animal husbandry and extension services. Now, as we all understand, the problem, one of the problem in country like India, such a big country, where a lot of issues exist along with the issues of animal welfare, the enforcement part. And enforcement is something which I think is still needs to be improved a lot, and that can only happen by more people demanding high welfare, or people who are in the position to make that implementation happen must understand the importance of it beyond animals, that what other wider impact and positive benefits high animal welfare has. And I think that's where the people, particularly from veterinary community, actually play a very important role. So the people like you who might move into the different roles and positions in future have the huge influence if you consider animal welfare as one of the key principle of whatever you do in your jobs or any other venture you get into. Also, I think often we have seen that a farmer, like this is a my personal experience. I would like to share that when we visit to field and we meet farmers, the farmers first and foremost is that as soon as you tell them that this is how you should keep your animals, the first response comes is that, oh, you are going to teach me how to keep my animals. I have been doing this business from generations. I'm in this, right? So you we know better than probably people sitting in an office and reading books. But I realized one thing, that they give a lot of respect to veterinarians, and they do consider their views as something which they feel that it's in their benefit and also in the benefit of animals. So I think the more the veterinary community and veterinarians get involved and start talking about the issue of animal and their welfare, it will certainly help us to build this movement wherein we can work together, bring more and more people with us, bring different organizations, different community group to make this a wider movement where animals and their welfare is addressed. World Animal Protection also have this network of volunteers where we, encourage people who want to help animals in whichever capacity and whichever way they can to become part of, our volunteer network. So we would like to empower individuals to make sure that they can actually take actions, or they can even start some local initiative by reaching different stakeholders, asking them to improve the conditions of animals in their areas, whether it is animals in street, or animals in farming, or animals in wild. There are different activities we do organize on regular basis. So we would like to have more and more people in different locations. So the similar activities can be organized at the same time in different cities across the country. In addition to that, World Animal Protection is an organization who believe in making sure that people lead initiatives their own. So sometime, once you become a volunteer, it is not mandatory that you only need to wait for World Animal Protections to tell you which activities you should do and participate in. But if as an individual or as a group of individuals can also develop and take some activity, take some initiatives at local level to sensitize public, to sensitize local government, and to sensitize corporates or media in your respective locations. We believe that one organization may not be able to do enough. Therefore, it is essential to bring more and more people involved and become part of this whole idea of animal welfare movement. So more the people, more the voice, I think we will have much stronger support for animal and their causes. Um, in terms of the previous work, which I'm not sure you are aware, but prior to the current strategy, World Animal Protection has done a lot of work in India and globally. Uh, in some of the work which we did is in disaster management with National Disaster Management Authority and National Disaster Response Force. And as part of this work, we established 6 veterinary emergency response unit in different veterinary colleges across the country, including Chennai, Anand in Gujarat, Palampur in Himachal Pradesh, Jabalpur in Madhya Pradesh, Patna in Bihar, and Guwahati in Assam. So these are the veterinary emergency response unit, which is basically meant to train veterinarians and animal husbandry staff in the state government, and the SDRF, which is the State Disaster Response Force, and NDRF, National Disaster Response Force personnel, to how to manage animals in emergency situations. And as you might have seen in the recent past, the NDRF have been very actively helping and rescuing animals in disaster situations. And this is a result of the work which World Animal Protection did in last 4 5 years with the government of India to train the all NDRF personnel on rescuing and helping animals in emergency situation. In addition to that, World Animal Protection played a very important role and contributed immensely in ending the bear dancing tradition in India. So some of you might have seen or heard about. We used to have street, performance of bears in different part of the country. Now that is the something which is no longer take place. And 2012, India has been declared as a free from bear dancing, and World Animal Protection was one of the organization who was part of that campaign and supported that initiative in India with different partner organizations. Apart from that, we have done some work on the dogs as well, the street dog, and worked with different stakeholders to make the disease, rabies as a notifiable disease, as well as uh, you know developing animal birth control guidelines with the Animal Welfare Board of India, and also worked with different municipal authorities to help them develop their dog population management control program. So I just want to basically say that the world animal protection is not just limited to the one specific issue or one specific species. We work for all animals. Every animal matters to us, and our strategic focus might be on the farming and wildlife areas at this stage. But as and when there are situations or need arise, world animal protection is at the forefront to respond to any such situation with the help of supporters, different stakeholders, our partner organizations, and people like you who volunteer with us. I think with that note, I will pass it on to my colleague Shubhobroto, who will talk about some of the work which we are doing around wildlife, and the different component of the wildlife work. But before that, if anyone has any specific question, I would be very happy to answer now, or maybe after the Subhobroto finish, whichever works for you.
So we actually had introduction planned out before starting the topic. So we actually had a plan to introduce you guys to the platform before you guys started the presentation. But I would still like to introduce you because I would want all of the attendees to know the achievements you have done. So, Yukta, it would be lovely if you could introduce, just give a brief introduction about him.
Yeah, sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, so can you hear me now?
So just a minute. Avnish, Yukta is saying she can't unmute herself. Could you want to step in?
Yes, Pruha, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yeah, yes,
Yeah,
I can.
so do you have questions for Gajendra or you want me to present?
So actually, before going on to the questions, I would like one of my teammates to actually introduce him, just a little about him, because I want everybody present here to know a little about him. So we actually planned that before the presentation, but sir started it, so I couldn't interrupt him in between, so I let him do it.
Yeah,
So
so you can introduce him now.
yes, I can. I'm just asking one of my teammates to do it. Yukta, are you there? You're there.
Yes,
Can you
please.
please introduce her?
Yes, he's online.
I guess something is wrong with her mic. If I'm audible, I'll be introducing you, sir. Can you hear me well and proper? Then I'll only be introducing you. Um, okay. Mr. Gajendra Kumar Sharma, Country Director of World Animal Protection India, joined the organization in November 2007. He has an interdisciplinary background in program management and audit, finance, and organization development. He has helped develop world animal welfare education, animals in disaster, animals in farming, and animals in wild and other programs in India. Under his leadership to date, World Animal Protection's Animal Welfare Education Program was endorsed by the Ecological and Earth Sciences Unit of UNESCO India, developed India's first national code of practices for management of dairy animals in collaboration with the National Dairy Research Institute NDRI. Also, as part of the disaster management program, he led the collaborative work with NDRF and NDMA to mainstream animals and their welfare in disaster management in India. As a result, India became one of the first few countries in the world to have dedicated national DM plans for animals, along with effective integration of animals' welfare in National Disaster Management Plan, and established sixth Veterinary Emergency Response Unit in Veterinary College located in Anand, Chennai, Palanpur, Jabalpur, Patna, and Guwahati to protect animals and the people that depend on them. So it's a great honor to have you in this webinar and to speak with us. Thank you so much for sharing your information with us. If anybody has any questions,
Thanks.
you can drop them in the chat box. If not, we can proceed with Shubhobroto sir's presentation. Sir, I personally have a question on the disaster management aspect. Like, what goes on, like, when that is happening? What are the basic initiatives that one takes during such cases?
So in disaster situations, see, there are three things: what needs to be done before disaster, what needs to be done during the disaster, and what needs to be done after the disaster. And the preparedness is the best measure to take. Therefore, our emphasis was that, as part of the disaster preparedness work, which government has been doing, so, how the infrastructure can be developed or created to ensure the safe evacuation of people along with their animals. And it was very simple until we actually introduced the idea wherein people in the government felt that, what exactly you mean, and why you want animals should be included as part of disaster management plan. Government already have a policies and the this you know the framework to compensate people if they lost their animals due to any emergency situation like flood and all that. So they actually not really keen to even hear the idea of animals in disaster. So this concept of animals in disaster is actually created by us in India. So when we started the conversation, the first thing we suggested that when you are talking to the farmers, for example, you go in a village and you create a flood awareness, campaign. You talk people that you need to have uh, a basic kit in ready. So when the announcement take place, you can just, run away with that one bag with all your valuable and all important papers or maybe something to eat and medicine, all that. Nobody was actually talking about what they will do with their animals, because you can't take your animals wherever the shelter you will be putting into, and there is no such facility. So we propose that wherever the human shelter is being built, the ground floor of that the same building can be used to keep animals. It will solve multi-purpose. The first, it will help animal to save, but it will also, the milk animals can be used to provide milk to the people who are living in those shelters during the emergency situation. In addition to that, the animals which may not be, people may not be able to carry with them or move along with them. We suggested that the probability of survival of an animal in the flood situation, for example, is much higher if the animal is untied. So you just untie the animal before you leave. So there is a probability that animal will move around and they will find a safe place. And once they reach on a high ground, a necessary provision of feed and water can be made there. So these are some of the the very basic things which we proposed, and ensure that all this is included into the all three component of the disaster management plan. What needs to be done before and during and after the disaster, and you will be happy to know that initially it was very challenging, but then after a year or so, when we start having conversation with more and more people and reaching out to the community and farmers, animal owners directly, there is a lot of interest among the government officials also that they really want to, have this as part of their disaster management program, because this is the one particular area where they used to face a lot of challenges and problem when they used to evacuate people. There were people who were not willing to move without their cattle or without their goat or sheep. So we actually somehow help them in a way that how you can ensure the safe evacuation of the people along with their animals.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for clearing my doubt.
Thank you. I think there was some questions. Okay, so there was a question around current animal husbandry education enough for wildlife welfare? If not, what more can be done in order to do so? So, I think the education is something which needs to be regularly updated based on the demand of the situation. And I think sometimes that's where the whole process of what needs to be part of the curriculum and what should not be is a big debate, and a process seems quite complicated in our country. So looking at the current the curriculum when we talk about the wildlife, I think the more focus has been given on the conservation, and often it seems very much acceptable if animals being used for some or the other commercial purpose by the people, and it's I think developed based on this whole thinking around that people have the right to use animal. I think that should not be the something which be part of the education, because if we continue to do so, there will be time when you probably end up spending millions of rupees to save different species of wild animals, because people will continue to use them, and the more they will use and illegal way of dealing into the wildlife trade and all that. So all this will add up, and we will probably lost all the species at some point of time. So I think the along with conservation, this idea of animals should not be used for their commercial purpose, particularly the wild animals, must be incorporated into the whatever been communicated or part of the education curriculum.
Thank you, sir. I guess that's it. Nobody has any more doubts.
So maybe Shubhobroto is next over to you.
Yes.
You want to introduce him first before he start,
Yes.
or I would like to?
Yes, sir. I would like to introduce him first before you start.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Varsha, thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Varsha, can you unmute yourself?
Yes. Am I audible?
Yes, you are. Can you please introduce Shubhobroto, sir?
Yes. Mr. Shubhobroto Ghosh, a former journalist with the Telegraph newspaper, whose work has also been published in The Statesman, Times of India, New York Times, The Hindu, Montreal Sarai, BBC, Sanctuary Asia, Seves, Down to Earth, Sai Club, Science Reporter, and Nature India Online. He is the former coordinator of the Indian Zoo Inquiry Project sponsored by ZooCheck Canada and has attended the Principles and Practice Training course at Durrell Wildlife Conservation Trust in 1999. He did his master's thesis on British zoos at the University of Westminster in 2004. He has worked at the Wildlife Trust of India, Traffic India, and is currently the Wildlife Projects Manager for World Animal Protection in India. He has contributed to several books, including The Jane Effect, a biographical tribute to Jane Goodall by Mark Peikoff and Dale Peterson, 33 Ways to Look at an Elephant, edited by Dale Peterson, and an environmental biography of the ex-Prime Minister of India, Indira Gandhi, A Life in Nature by Jairam Ramesh. He is the author of the book Dreaming in Calcutta and Channel Islands, which was published in 2015. In 2020, he was formally commended for his coverage of Cosmos, the world's most popular science series, in various forms of the media by Anne Ruin, the producer of Cosmos and wife of Carl Sagan. We're pleased to have you here, sir.
Thank you so much, Varsha, for the introduction. It's an honor to have you here, sir, to talk with us. Thank you so much for attending this webinar and giving us this opportunity to know much more about wildlife. And with this, you can start with the presentation.
Thank you, Spruha, and thank you, Varsha, and also thank you to Riyal, who has actually been our volunteer and has done excellent work on animal protection, particularly cruelty to animals in fashion in the pure silk industry, which entails the killing of hundreds and thousands of silkworms and silk moths and entails child labor. So I'll just open my screen and share my presentation. Let's share this screen. Click that. Can you see my screen?
Yes, sir, we can see it. It is
Okay,
visible.
you can see my screen. So this is principally about our campaign to highlight the cruel nature of these elephant rides at Amer Fort in Jaipur, in Rajasthan, which is, of course, an iconic place for all tourists to visit from all over the world. So, actually, there are around 86 elephants right now. There have been historically around more than 100 elephants, and this has been a traditional spectacle whereby people ride these elephants to go up and down the Amer Fort, which is a place of iconic culture. And this is seen as a popular activity to identify the essential incredible India experience for people from all over the world, international as well as domestic tourists, but principally international tourists. So, the background and current status of this activity is that the latest survey of captive elephants in India actually reveals that there are 2,554 captive elephants in India, and elephants are used for tourist rides in Amer Fort. And elephants are actually kept in captivity uh, in a wide variety of situations. Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you're audible. Yeah.
Okay. And there are 86 elephants in that particular venue. So the principal issue about this particular place is the conglomeration of these elephants together in one particular venue. And Rajasthan is not an elephant range state, so there are no wild elephants in Rajasthan. So these elephants have actually been brought from other areas, as part of the transaction which actually takes place, illegally from Arunachal, from Assam, from Bihar in the fair in Sonpur, whereby they are cruelly brought into venues like Amer Fort and in different other venues where some of them are kept as pets. Rich people like to keep elephants as pets in Bihar, Uttar Pradesh. Then sometimes they are used for marriage ceremonies. Then they are actually paraded around the streets. Sometimes people use them for, soliciting money. There were elephants in the city of Delhi too, but now they've been taken off, and we've actually also conducted the uh, survey of the last elephant, an interview uh, of the elephant named Lakshmi, who was the last elephant kept in Delhi, about the situation and the perspective of the Mahout, who actually was keeping that elephant. So this is basically the background and the current status of these captive elephants in Rajasthan as well as in India. So there have been concerns on the welfare of these captive elephants since the 1990s, and initially it was focused more on the welfare issues of the elephants, rather than stopping the rides altogether. And there were incremental steps about giving them water when they were riding, giving them adequate veterinary care, because, most of the elephants have wounds and are sick and ill, and they're in dire need, and they have always been in dire need of adequate veterinary treatment, because the mahouts have actually been resorting to some kind of traditional medicine instead of modern day allopathic medicine or modern day surgical procedures, and so on and so forth. And there have been many NGOs involved in this, helping suffering, and PETA and Humane Society International, Elephant Family, and us, of course. And work has progressed alongside the elephant owners, trying to convince them that these elephants should be well treated. Like you see in the photograph, these elephants have been brought together at the base of the Amer Fort before the elephants are actually scheduled to be ridden in the morning in that particular venue. There are timings for the elephants to be ridden. So the rides actually uh, I think, end at around 11 o'clock, and they start early in the morning. And there is a Supreme Court case regarding all captive elephants in India. And this was initiated by a group called Wildlife Rescue and Rehabilitation Center, which is a sister organization of a group in Bangalore called Compassion Unlimited Plus Action. Then there was a group called Sai Sanctuary, who was also party to the court case, and helping suffering. Then Plants and Animal Welfare Society in Bombay, and SAI stands for Save Animals Initiative, and stalwart wildlifer named Sri Shakti Ranjan Banerjee from Bengal, who was the former director of the WWF India Eastern region. And this court case, this petition seeks to improve the lot of all captive elephants in India. And this court case is still on, and the Ahmed Fort situation is of particular interest with regard to this court case, to address the plight, the health, the welfare, the veterinary treatment, which is of particular interest, I believe, to the audience today and all of you at IVSA, that how should the elephants be treated, and whether the rides at all are inimical to the health and the welfare and the well-being of the elephants in Amir Fort. So World Animal Protection has been doing surveys on these elephants for more than 2 decades now, and the latest survey was done in 2020 with federal government help, by the Project Elephant. They went in and they did a survey with veterinarians and their own officials. And World Animal Protection renewed engagement in 2016. The survey, of course, of the Project Elephant was done by themselves, independently with their own staff. And the World Animal Protection surveys have been done separately. We were not party to the 2020 survey done, but we have been surveying the situation since the past 2 decades on our own, and many research documents have quoted our contributions to the status of these particular elephants, and we have been campaigning in various perspectives and in various capacities to highlight the unfortunate state of these particular elephants in Jaipur. Uh, so we have been doing public mobilization. We have been speaking to corporates, huge corporates like Tripadvisor and TUI and Intrepid, who have taken off, wildlife entertainment from their itineraries as a principal attraction. And they have actually introduced animal welfare policies to actually promote the idea of animal welfare and wildlife conservation so that these abusive entertainments activities are actually slowly phased out, and sustainable solutions by way of speaking to the government so that the government also understands that this is no longer an acceptable activity in the 21st century. And there are people powered campaigns accompanying corporate and government engagement whereby people actually sign petitions and take pledges not to ride these elephants. And when I speak of public mobilization and corporate engagement, there are more than 250 companies, actually more than 300 companies, which have actually taken a pledge not to offer elephant rides or even other wildlife abusive activities like taking selfies with tigers in Thailand or even dolphin shows, which we are discouraging because they actually harm the animals which come into close contact with humans. And as we have actually realized from the coronavirus epidemic that close contact between humans and wildlife can potentially be a source for zoonotic diseases and spread diseases which can actually go viral and cause death and destruction. So there are intervention points. First, as I said, Tripadvisor campaign. You can read it, a lot of them online, for corporate and government engagement in the Indian landscape, not to sell these entertainment tickets. Many of these companies have actually moved away. Even Expedia, which is a gigantic tourist company, has moved away from promoting these elephant rides. Then highlighting the prevalence of tuberculosis in Amer Fort elephants, which is actually very unfortunate. The sick elephants, as well as, the proximity of those sick elephants to not only the tourists but also the mahouts and their families who actually live alongside the elephants, that we have highlighted the health dangers of tuberculosis, which is also a major concern with captive elephants in general, not only in India but also all over the world, including Europe and North America. So World Elephant Day, we have conducted several activities, including a cycle rally and reaching out to the press in partnership with the Press Club of Jaipur, so that people are aware, the media is aware, and civil society is made aware of the negative nature of these elephant rides and to question the basic status quo of these elephant rides. And also, we have been instrumental in the retirement of 20 elephants, whereby the Rajasthan state government took a Shubhobroto decision to retire these elephants given their health conditions that they were not fit for riding early last year. And we were also participants in the stakeholder meeting. Uh, we were a participant in this Project Elephant stakeholder meeting on 3rd of August last year. And as you can see on the right, this is an article written by us with me as the author, advocating compassion for captive elephants, a world animal protection perspective in India. This is in a newsletter called Trumpet by Project Elephant. The first time they actually addressed captive elephant issues, and this was actually printed in their January issue, published in March, little late because of the coronavirus epidemic. And this was actually endorsed by Project Elephant, our stance of actually highlighting the abusive nature of these elephant rides in Jaipur and Amir Fort. And we have also given input in a latest case concerning an African elephant who is kept under very unsatisfactory conditions in Delhi Zoo, named Shankar. Like Priol, we had another volunteer named Nikita Dhawan who worked with us, and she contributed articles on captive elephants. And she actually read our work, an earlier work also done by me when World Animal Protection was called World Society for Protection of Animals, on the unfortunate solitary state of an African elephant in Delhi Zoo called Shankar, gifted by the Zimbabwean government. and she decided to file a public interest litigation. PIL was filed, and this was accepted by the Delhi High Court, and it has actually made a lot of waves with major media companies covering our role in it, including American Broadcasting Corporation and British Broadcasting Corporation, about returning that elephant back to Africa with the help of a group called the Aspinall Foundation, who are starting the world's first elephant release project from captivity to the wild from Howlett's in Kent to Kenya. It is a challenging project. It is a new project. It is a project which is trying to actually set a precedent for releasing elephants from captivity to the wild, and to actually also question the basic ethics of keeping elephants in captivity, not only African elephants but Asian elephants all over the country, including the elephants in Jaipur in Rajasthan. So as I said, in India, around 20 companies, 19 companies have signed our wildlife friendly pledge. We have several influencers on board the World Animal Protection position. People have taken the pledge not to ride elephants, and there have been several rounds of stakeholder engagements with both state and national governments and concerned NGOs. On the right hand side, you see the elephants in the stable in Amer Fort. And I should also mention that India had elephants which were used in circuses. That has been completely prohibited now. And there is an injunction by the Central Zoo Authority also in 2009 not to keep elephants in zoo situations, but that has not been implemented totally because of lack of resources and logistics. But still, welfare conditions have been set so that better conditions are provided for the zoo elephants. And there is also a no breeding policy for these captive elephants in Amer Fort. So for the zoo elephants also, you can't keep them just like that by chaining them or keeping them solitary. You have to provide adequate space and welfare and veterinary facilities so that they are kept well. So there are challenges because the Rajasthan government wants intervention from the central government, from Project Elephant, to initiate any changes, to retire these elephants from riding to elephant-friendly facilities, because there are lots of logistics and livelihood issues, and there are also issues of economics and commerce, to say nothing of tourism as well as cultural heritage. So that is one challenge, and the central government has been unwilling to intervene till now, given the sensitive nature of this particular topic. And legal help has been sought for strengthening the World Animal Protection intervention from legal groups, including some groups which are very internationally well known and who have actually spoken out against captive elephants in the Indian context, as they are mentioned in the Wildlife Protection Act, with particular reference to Section 40, which allows the continued trade in elephants. And this is actually now being considered in the Indian Parliament, so that this practice and this exemption given in the Wildlife Protection Act is actually ended. And the central government suggestion in the report made in the 2020 report, it will be reiterated by our organization to phase out the rides in favor of other humane alternatives like battery cars or electric cars or jeeps, which some of which is already in place for the visitors to actually go up to the fort without actually harming or torturing these elephants. So World Animal Protection continues to highlight trade in live elephants, as I said, Section 40, and some of you might be aware of the debate going around about the Wildlife Protection Act with a group called Life Legal Initiative for Forest and Environment. They've got the Alternative Nobel Prize from Sweden, and they have also endorsed our position of not allowing the exemption in the trade and commerce of live elephants in captivity, which helps to keep this population of elephants stable in Jaipur. Because without elephants, of course, new elephants being added to the population, that population of elephants would slowly dwindle and not remain 100 or so, which it has for the past several decades. And people powered campaigns will accompany our stakeholder engagement with both center and state governments. We have had several petitions made. We have been working on wildlife trade. We have petitioned the Prime Minister of India to put an end to wildlife trade. For the G20 summits in 2020 as well as 2021, more than 100,000 people have actually signed the petitions, and it is an ongoing campaign to actually bring in more awareness on the nature of the wildlife trade in both native and non-native species, because these animals suffer hugely when they are actually kept in captivity, and wildlife do not make suitable pets. That is what our plain and simple motto is, that wildlife belongs in the wild, not in captivity. Wildlife do not represent pets. And the legal presence of wild animal protection could be strengthened if we get an opportunity to make our intervention in any of the current court cases. In any case, our documents are already referenced, our letters of support. For example, the African elephant court case, it has our letter of support. Our research papers are already given to the court in the captive elephant case in the Supreme Court case of 2014. And elephant friendly sanctuaries are for initiating the process of transfer of elephants from Jaipur. And more sanctuaries, one in Tura, one in Hana, and one in Janagar, where these elephants can actually be shifted from this abusive existence. So they are for retirement, and in the picture you see all the elephants are together before the ride morning. Disease and zoonosis have been highlighted as far as the New Deal campaign, which highlights the fact that wildlife are not commodities. Whatever the species, elephants, tigers, in India for the first time in 2014, that animals are sentient beings and not commodities. And the focus currently is on ill and illegally owned elephants in that particular place in Amer Fort in Jaipur, so that they can be phased out in a structured manner. And there are negotiations expected with elephant-friendly venues to expedite the process of transfer if they are willing to take in the elephants and get into an arrangement for shifting them with an arrangement made with the elephant owners and the stakeholders involved in that venue. Then it would actually benefit all parties. As well as the elephants. So it will be for both as well as elephants, good criticism, and the local sort of people campaigning against that particular venue, drawing negative reaction and negative response from foreigners and the international community on the image of Rajasthan and Jaipur. So the way ahead also includes a review of the Wildlife Protection Act, which we have given to the central government with regard to elephants, and also with regard to other issues of animal welfare and conservation, including, the dangers of actually allowing trade and the keeping of exotic pets, which can promote cruelty to animals, especially this popular trend of keeping iguanas and parrots, and macaws and cockatoos and what have you, where the animals get severely stressed. They might breed, but breeding is not necessarily a symbol of high animal welfare, because human beings breed under the most appalling circumstances, but that does not go to say that they are happy. So there are online and offline activities to strengthen world animal protection presence in Jaipur. As I said, we've already had several rounds of these activities. There have been film shows. We have a half-an-hour film on the captive elephants of Jaipur. And there has been a cycle rally, there has been media exposure. We are planning to actually strengthen our offline footprint in Jaipur very soon, to strengthen our presence in Jaipur with regard to the abuse which is going on regarding these elephants. As you can see, that is the place where the elephants are being ridden and they are being hit with these wooden sticks to actually make them go up and down the hill. And previously they were using ankuses, metal ankuses, which are now banned, but they still do use them, on the slide. And campaigns are likely to be undertaken against recalcitrant corporates who are reluctant to actually make wildlife friendly practices or wildlife friendly pledges by taking off these elephant rides from their itineraries. If they continue to offer these and other wildlife abusive activities, like promoting people sitting with tigers and clicking pictures and dolphin shows, then we will actually target them and actually ask them to not undertake these activities and take off those activities from their itineraries and their schedules, so that tourists actually do not abuse animals as part of their tourist activities in India as well as abroad. And of course, there is the option, which is the last option, the parents are look into the of these particular elephants and not to retire them. And if all else fails, then there can be a campaign against them to petition them to actually change their policy for the benefit of these elephants. There are meetings scheduled with both the central and the state government. We are looking actively to bolster our campaigns in the public space, and we would welcome any help from organizations like you for any technical support. For example, a veterinarian speaking out against elephant cruelty in terms of the rides and the damage done to the health of these elephants and the well-being of these elephants in carrying tourists and going up and down a hill in a non-elephant rate state. A statement from the veterinarians or a veterinary student's body like you, IVSA, would be very helpful in this regard. And also present elephant-friendly sanctuaries as models to respect India's national heritage animal. As I said, there are some of these sanctuaries in India and abroad, including France, US, and we are actually looking at some of these sanctuaries in India to be uh, an alternative to abusing elephants in rides and keeping them chained where they can only move one step forward and two steps back, so that they can actually treat India's national heritage animal with greater respect. The elephant was actually declared as India's national heritage animal in 2010. And there has been a report called Gaja, which actually calls for greater respect and understanding of captive elephants in India, which is very much in line with what World Animal Protection is suggesting at the moment. So these are some pictures. Together we can give elephants a better future. So we want to work in solidarity with all stakeholders, including IVSA, to end elephant rights and to end them in a sustainable manner, not by just saying that the rights should stop overnight, but taking into account the legitimate interests of all parties, including the elephant owners and the mahouts. And open to ideas for World Elephant Day, which is on 12th August 2022. And as I said, here you see all Asian elephants in abusive situations, but we are also looking at the plight of the two African elephants in India, one in Delhi Zoo and in Mysore Zoo, who are kept alone, Shankar and Rambo, so that those two elephants also become representative of the plight of all elephants in captivity, be they African elephants or be they Asian elephants. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for the wonderful presentation. So I have a doubt regarding what if I see any anybody raising a wild animal which is illegal to be raised. So what can I do to stop from that happening personally?
Okay, so you mean to say that you see anybody riding a wild animal in India?
Like for example, if you take parrots and all, they are illegal to be put as pets, right? According to the Animal Welfare Board of India. So, but I've seen many people who own parrots and they keep them in cages. So, in such conditions, what do we do to help the animals?
Okay, that's a very good question. Actually, the thing which you should realize, first of all, is that, see, we are not the executing or implementing authority. So, the executing and implementing authority are the Forest Department and the Wildlife Crime Control Bureau. So, wherever you are, you will have a forest department. And in many places in India, at least in Delhi, in Calcutta, Bombay, Madras, and I think possibly in Guwahati, there will be officers of the Wildlife Crime Control Bureau. So you should alert them. You could also alert us, and we could actually pass on your information to these enforcement authorities so that people do not indulge in these, tendencies to keep these birds in cages, and especially for parrots and these rose-ringed parakeets and all these birds which people keep in cages. And there's a tendency, as you rightly said, to keep them in small cages and make them do tricks because they talk well and all that. There is awareness needed, and it has to be conveyed to the Wildlife Crime Control Bureau and the Forest Department. We have actually passed on such information from several sources. It has happened on multiple occasions, and on some occasions there has been action taken. For example, some people actually pose with pythons and all that. I saw that myself when I was traveling to Shimla, so I reported it to the Wildlife Crime Control Bureau, and that is how the awareness is done, and then they look into your complaint and they go and approach these people, given the resources and the manpower they have, and try to actually do something about the situation to raise awareness. Also, their officers alert people to particular areas or particular individuals who are involved in the keeping of these indigenous birds, which are illegal. Actually, you can't legally keep these rose-ringed parakeets, and all these parakeets are parrots. All parakeets are parrots, but all parrots are not parakeets. So yes, I mean, do feel free to get in touch with the Forest Department and the Wildlife Crime Control Bureau. You will get their websites for every state in India and union territory. Or you could let us know wherever you've actually seen, and we can pass on the information for you to the enforcement authority.
Okay, thank you so much, sir. There are a few questions in the chat box, sir. So one question is, when we think of animal protection, animal rights come to mind, but in their execution, what is the limit? Like, where do we draw the line?
Okay, yeah, there is. That's a very good question also. So see, there are several movements which are going along together, side by side. There is the environmental movement broadly, okay, things like climate change and so on. Then there is the conservation movement, which is more about protecting, wildlife and habitat and so on and so forth. And there are many issues which are coming up with the conservation movement with regards to the rights of indigenous people to live in wildlife habitats, and issues like trophy hunting and things like that, sustainable use of resources, lethal sustainable use. We are against lethal sustainable use because they are abusive to the animals, and they are actually abusive also to local communities who do not benefit from such situations. There is the animal welfare movement, which focuses on the status of animals as individuals who have their own well-being. There are several kinds of welfare. For example, freedom to express behavior, freedom to have food, freedom to have water, freedom to move around, freedom to have access to sunlight, freedom to actually express their natural behavior with adequate space. There are 5 freedoms. It's from a British commission called the Bramble Commission. This is part of welfare, whereby the animals are actually catered to, but it doesn't rule out, some kinds of use of animals, which is the next question about medical advances. As long as you are humane to the animal in your dealings with them. And in animal rights, there are, no abusive activities or usage of animals allowed at all. So in simple terms, animal welfare, if you speak about cages, it is about making the cage bigger to make the life of the animal better in the short term. Animal rights, no cages. And in conservation, then you actually are not concerned about the cage as long as the animal population is actually safe. There is overlap between animal welfare and animal rights, but these are the broad contours. We are an animal welfare organization, and whilst we are completely sympathetic to animal rights, our focus is on making the lives of animals better in the conditions that they are. And for the elephants of Jaipur, we see no reason, that the conditions, that the animal welfare of the elephants could be adhered to in the current conditions.
Thank you so much, sir.
Should I take the next question?
Yes, sir, you could definitely.
Should I take this medical question?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah, okay. So, see, my opinion on this is that World Animal Protection was actually part of a group called the Boyd Group, whereby we actually undertook many discussions and negotiations with the medical community and the veterinary community in addressing the welfare of laboratory animals. Okay. So the current position, as I believe, is actually to phase out the use of animals in experiments which are cruel or which are unnecessary or which are repetitive, okay, and which actually clearly do not have any visible benefit to human to the development of any useful human medicine and so on and so forth. There is no direct correlation. If there is no direct correlation between making an experiment on an animal and developing a human medicine which will benefit many people. But with the coronavirus vaccine, of course, everybody is aware, even you are aware that, there have been tests on animals to develop the vaccine, and most groups, including animal welfare groups and animal rights groups, have been cognizant of the fact and have understood this as part of a contingent reality that, this testing has taken place. But they have also said that alternative actually processes, if they can be actually instituted, and as I said, if the whole idea is to reduce suffering, okay, so we can't do it in one day, although there are groups which say that just stop animal testing immediately. To find alternatives like tissue culture, to find alternatives also, for example, there are human donors who actually human volunteers who came in for certain tests, which are of course risky to a large degree, but they can also be instituted with consent. For as you will know, as veterinary students, there are human beings who consent to test themselves with new drugs and new procedures, provided a certain guideline, a certain set of guidelines are followed for the implementation of human rights and not being harmed. Informed consent, that is what it is called for testing of medicine. But of course, one realizes that there is a tremendous number of animals in the laboratory industry and the laboratory setup. Some of them are used in the development of medicines, for example, to fight against diseases like cancer and AIDS. It can't be done away all at once. But if alternatives can be looked into and the animal suffering reduced, then we are all in favor of the reduction. This is my opinion on it. And the last one, horses in Indian weddings or other occasions. Yeah, what can we do? Yeah, actually don't endorse it actually. For example, if you are getting married, don't ride on a horse and be the groom that way. Okay. And that, yeah, of course. And if you actually see it, I understand the difficulty of actually, protesting on the spot, but there are ways to actually get the message, maybe after the event, to talk to people, to actually discourage the use of horses, because this is a genuine issue and this comes to us very often, because this band baja barat and people making these noises, it actually makes the horses very uncomfortable, and it makes them hearing impaired. It affects their hearing. So first, not to endorse the activity if you are actually getting married or you are in a ceremony, not to have the animal in the first place from your own side. In my individual capacity, my duty and my responsibility starts with my behavior and my own activity and my responsibility. And the second is, of course, to raise awareness. Considerable amount of awareness has actually been raised on the abusive use of animals in situations like marriages and so on and so forth. So there are many youngsters like you who would not actually be indulging in things like using horses, and there are so many news items which come to my notice about youngsters choosing animal friendly marriages. Veganism is on the rise, and not using meat products or leather products or fur products or silk products, and Priyal has done excellent work in that regard to actually replace wildlife abusive activities and animal abusive activities with animal friendly activities. Now, fourth one, my question is on wildlife tourism. We all know that it benefits humankind, but there's negative impact on wildlife, like it disturbs animals' breeding and feeding pattern. Also, it increases vulnerability to predators and competitors. So, how can we really balance this by without disturbing wildlife? That's a very, very, very relevant question. You see, I have actually gone deep into this, both in a personal and a professional capacity, and my answer to this is that, you see, there is good and bad in an activity like tourism. Okay, so it has the good aspects that it actually benefits some people, it raises revenue and all that. But the negative aspect is what has been written about: disturbance to animals and all that, vulnerability to predators, competitors, disturbing animals, then feeding patterns. So, what is needed is that we have actually published a lot of material on this, and one of our influencers is a wildlife photographer who is an actor named Shubhobroto Chakraborty, who has said that wildlife tourism should only be undertaken when we have some parameters in place, in the sense that you can only visit a wildlife venue once you have gone through, let us say, ABCD, 1 to 10 set of guidelines, and you have actually satisfactorily proved to the people who are handling that venue that, okay, you are a responsible tourist and you will not misbehave in that situation, and these are the only people who will be allowed to go into that wildlife venue, national park or protected area or sanctuary or whatever, which actually mitigates the risk of actually having people and going in and making a ruckus and having picnic and music and disturbing the animals and all that. So that is the balance, which one must keep in mind, but of course, life is not fair. We all have to live with the reality, and you just have to do the best you can in the situation you are in to actually decrease the impact on wildlife. First of all, I should not misbehave myself if I am actually speaking of responsible wildlife tourism. And second is that I should probably choose a place where these guidelines are adhered to. I should not actually press upon people to actually go and look for tigers and other big cats and large animals in a place where they are, by putting in extra pressure, or putting in extra pressure to forest guards to actually disturb animals or bait animals and so on and so forth, which we have actually noticed. And we've got two companies who have committed not to bait lions of Gir National Reserve, so as to ensure that they are not disturbed. So there are innumerable cases about the balance the which the question is actually leading to, about disturbing wildlife. I have just enunciated some of them. There are many papers on this, and you will also realize that there is a lot of material on the internet about this. So it depends from situation to situation. One size doesn't fit all.
Thank you so much, sir, for answering this question. I guess there are no more questions in the chat box. Sir, I do have one last question. Am I audible, sir?
Yes, please go ahead.
So, as far as I know, the penalty for killing a stray dog in India is very low. Probably around 10 to 50 rupees is what I know of. So, is there anything that is being done to prevent that, like to increase the fine? Because I think it's been happening from a long time to change that, but is there any progress in what's happening?
Yes, the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act, in terms of the penalty which you mentioned just now, is just atrocious, 50 rupees. And it has been so since 1960, right? 1960 or 1956 or whenever, since whenever the act came into being. And there has been a very strong movement in recent years to actually change this, and there have been notable political personalities also who have actually spoken out, against this paltry fine, including Shashi Tharoor and Jai Panda and all that. So of course we are in favor of increasing the penalty, but you see, all laws have to go through a parliamentary process. So I do not think that the penalty has actually been changed, in the sense that the new penalties proposed have actually been instituted, but the process of initiating this legal change so that the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act is actually amended by this parliamentary process, and the new penalties are actually instituted, and they are actually embedded in the amended version of the act. That is very much on. I would actually have to seek a legal opinion from a lawyers collective or a lawyer to tell you what the exact situation currently is. What I can certainly say is that there is the process. For example, you mentioned about dogs. I know that because, I think somewhere in Chennai or in Bangalore, somebody threw a dog from a roof, and, there was only 50 rupees fine and all. Incidentally, that dog survived. But all these atrocities, 50 rupees is nothing. And people actually get away with these fines because, cruelty is rife, and people think, that I can only, flick 50 rupees and get away with murder. So the process most definitely, Spruha, is on. I mean, and your question is very well taken. But whether it has actually been changed, I don't think the answer is yes. The process is ongoing. That is what I can say. But there is a lot of awareness on this, on the subject you raised. And there is a considerable amount of momentum, in terms of political momentum, NGOs, civil society, pressing for the penalty to be changed. Now, when it happens, we will have to wait and see.
Okay. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. So I guess that's, I don't think anybody else has any questions. Sir, thank you so much for sharing such amazing information and answering all our doubts. Thank you so much, sir. But before we end the meeting, I guess, Priyal, if you're here, I do realize you have some information to share, so you can go ahead.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, I can hear you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Priyal Roy, and I'm the social media manager of IVSA India. As Shubhobroto said, I'm also currently volunteering for World Animal Protection India since past months, and I have been conducting civil service on behalf of our NGO, and I've been in contact with various renowned celebrities and entrepreneurs all over the country, talking to them about their usage of silk fabric in their daily lives and if they have the knowledge about its processing and how the silkworms are inhumanly killed for silk production. I was pretty shocked to see that almost 80% of the people that I interviewed knew about how silk is processed, and that after knowing about it, almost 90% of the people discontinued its purchase and switched to much more plant-based fabrics like cotton, bamboo silk, etc. However, there were many people who believed that it was a personal choice, which we agree with as well. But informing people how even an individual has a pretty big impact on multiple species of animals makes some difference, make people aware of how welfare of all the animals is also important, and that even a single small step makes a huge difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Priyal. But I do have a question for you, if you don't mind answering my question. Priyal, can you hear me?
So, am I audible?
Yeah.
Am I audible?
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
so
you
sorry.
just got stuck a little bit. I just wanted to ask, like, how did you like start volunteering for the NGO? Like, what was the process for it to join the
So,
NGO and all?
okay. So it was, I think, in September 2021. I was actually searching for volunteership around Delhi, NCR region, and I came across World Animal Protection, and I searched about them. I saw that they have a global uh, footprint about it, and that when I started contacting them, I came across Shubhobroto Ghosh, uh, and they guided me through all the process about what exactly we are uh, pu- pursuing and how I can be helpful towards the NGO. And that's how I came into this, and I started doing this service work.
Thank you so much.
And
Thank you,
Priyal has
Priyal.
also contributed an article on wildlife in entertainment, which is hosted on our website. So maybe Priyal, you can actually talk a little bit about that.
So I think around November or December, I wrote an article about how there is how we try to indulge wildlife and tourism, which maybe some people think that is beneficial, that it drives a lot of people uh, towards wildlife, but somehow we do uh, restrict their activities. We
Priyal, you're actually
somehow
not audible. There's a lot of network issues.
exploit them basically uh, for money or for the entertainment purposes, and we don't realize that we go for the rides, we go for the dolphin, the background of it, the main, how Am I audible?
I guess just having some network issues, yeah.
Hello, am I audible?
Yeah, Priya, yeah.
Okay, so yeah, I was saying that even though we do it for entertainment,
Can't hear you, Priya. I guess she's having really bad network, so.
hello.
Yes, Priya.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Actually, I'm in a hostel and the network is pretty bad here. So I was
Yeah,
saying
like,
that even though we go for the rides for our entertainment purposes, or we think that it might contribute towards preaching about the wildlife, but we actually don't know the background of it, like how they are trained, what kind of processes are being used. So that's actually pretty harsh. And only if we try to think about it, about how they are trained, what kind of conditions are they kept in, we might actually know what goes on. And we never actually thought to think about it because we are like, okay, this place has nice reviews about the elephant rides or the camel rides, which we know it because we have seen it since our childhood. But now that we know about it, now that we study about it, we know the background of it. So I think that's important for all of us to know. That's it.
thank you, Priya, for sharing about your journey with World Animal Protection. So I guess Priya is done talking. So, is there anything that you want to further talk about regarding anything? Shubhobroto, so can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, so I guess Priya is done with her, yeah, with the talk. So, is there anything else that you would like to share, or else we could end the webinar?
Yeah, I mean, of course, we remain grateful for Priyal's efforts, and of course to all of you at IVSA, for all your efforts. And we expect that this partnership is only the beginning. Priyal's internship and this conference. We expect that more of you will come on board, and we will continue to have a lively and healthy relationship with IVSA. And especially since you are veterinary students, we would actually welcome you, all over India and internationally as well, to be active partners in our work and our campaigns, and also maybe on a consultative basis, if there are veterinary issues to be looked into, and to continue this engagement, so that we have this, what we call this, the people powered move, the people powered campaign, the people powered movement, to raise awareness on humane treatment of animals. And veterinarians are at actually the forefront of this movement. Veterinarians look after the animals, they understand the animals, what they need, their health, their medical needs, etc., so on and so forth. So we really look forward to your engagement, and thank you and gratitude to all of you, Suha, Priyal, and to IVSA. We look forward to the continuation of World Animal Protection working with IVSA.
Thank you so much, sir. It's our honor to have you and Gajendra sir here on this platform and to have you share such very valuable information with us. And I hope this webinar helped few people. And I hope many more try to volunteer in world animal protection. And with that, I think we can end the webinar, sir. Thank you so much for giving your precious time and sharing this information with us. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.